Well, thank you all for being here. This turnout is just amazing. So kudos to our outreach folks that have been blasting out emails and putting flyers in restaurants and things like that. It's really amazing you guys are here, and we so appreciate it because this is really, really important. So for those of you that I haven't met, my name is Garrett Ball. I'm your fire chief here in Coal Creek. I've been doing that for about 7 years as the career chief here. Overall, I've been with the district for 17 years. It's all in my family. My wife volunteers at the district as well. She's been with me for 18 years. But it's a wonderful place to be and work. Prior to coming here, I was the Wildland Fire Operations Specialist for Boulder County. And so in that job, I not only got to fight fires in Boulder County and Jeffco and Larimer, but all over the American West. So I've been in a lot of different environments and seen a lot of different types of fire and seen a lot of homes burned, seen a lot of homes saved. And the latter is what we're hoping to do around here, right? So I will try and be brief in my comments because Kenzie's the most important tonight. A little bit about your fire department. We cover roughly 52 square miles. So we go from like a mile or so past Wonderview to the west, all the way down to Highway 93. And then we go all the way out to the Boulder County line. And then we go over to the north to Flagstaff Mountain and to the south to Golden Gate State Park. So within that, we have 4 fire stations, 15 fire trucks, a boat for the reservoir because we cover that too, and a boathouse, and about 60 plus volunteer firefighters. So it's a pretty amazing program. This past year in our recruiting cycle, we actually did a very limited recruiting because a lot of our stations just, in fact, are full. We're out of lockers. So it's a great testament to this community. So I'm not going to try and stand up here and tell you what a CWPP is. That's Kenzie's job here in a minute. But I do want to let you know why we feel it's important for the district, for the fire department, and for the community. You know, the fire district's going to a certain amount of expense to have this updated. And we feel it's really important because it's key to our success in the future. So when we get a big wildland fire in the future, and I say when, not if, it's a reality, right? This is going to help us be successful. And to me, being successful means being resilient as a community. It means getting you all out of here when it's time to evacuate in an efficient manner and you knowing where to go and how to do things. It means saving homes. It means saving neighborhoods. And to me personally, it means having our firefighters work in the safest environment in that fire that we can. Is that being? So last year, our firefighters responded to over 70 calls that were related to wildland fire here in the district. So Cork, who you'll see here in a minute, asked me to give you that number just so you realize that there's a lot of wildland fire response that takes place here in the district that you don't know about. And you know, when my firefighters say, "Hey, Chief, what's the goal here?" I said, the goal is to keep Coal Creek Canyon off the news, right? That's our goal. One small goal, but it means we get our job, kept things small. We're not always going to be able to keep things small. What fire scientists refer to like the 90th percentile fire days, when we have a 90-mile-an-hour wind ripping, you know, we may not be able to catch the fire. And that's what this is about, right? Being prepared for that. How many of you guys know that we had a 2-acre fire just a couple weeks ago? Anybody? Maybe 5 people? Yeah. There was a controlled burn and it was very successful. And if anyone wants to talk to me about that project afterwards, I'm happy to do that. But that's not the focus here. But no, we had a 2-acre fire in the middle of the night down on Plainview Road in that white flashy grass field lot. So you might think 2 acres, that's not that much, right? Like I look at California on the news and that's hundreds of thousands of acres. So what's 2 acres? Well, when you envision in your head something the size of 2 football fields actively on fire here in our home district, it's really concerning, right? So we just want you to know that that's the reality and that ignition sources are all around us and they're always going to be. So we need to do our part to make sure we don't let these things go big and be catastrophic, right? So last year, our firefighters spent 7,633, I'll be exact here, hours, both in training for response to emergencies here in the community and in responding. So that's how many hours our folks put in. Now we're asking you guys and gals to all put in a few hours on your own, right? Because we need your help. We really do. What you do before the fire is going to make a difference for all of us, not just the fire department, but yourselves and all sorts of people. So with that, Cork asked me to let you know that there will be 4 meetings in June. So basically what we're doing is lumping the neighborhoods and communities that surround our 4 fire stations. And we're going to have smaller, more neighborhood-based meetings to really dial into detail and figure out what needs to be done and how we're going to go about doing it. So those will be in June. There's information on those at the back table, so make sure you grab some info on your way out. If you're confused as to what, I think Cork was calling them neighborhood clusters or something, what cluster you're in, we can certainly help you out with that as well, okay? All right, so with that, I'd like to introduce all the people that you've been getting emails from recently, so you can put a face to the email address. So first we have Jody Dixon, who's there in the back. We all know Jody from Saws and Slaws. We're also lucky to have Jody as one of our newest board members at the Fire Protection District. So. Then Maya, where's Maya? She's hanging out. She's from the Boulder Watershed Collective that we work with very closely. We have Cork Rich in the back there. Cork's from the Blue Mountain Forest Stewardship Initiative. And is Nate here? Okay, we'll skip Nate there. And then Kristen was back there. I guess she's a Coker Canyon resident and business owner. So they're the outreach team. They're the ones going to be letting you know what's going on and where you need to show up and things like that to really get this thing rolling, right? All right, and Ben Full. In fact, he's our Colorado State Forester. He's been super helpful to all of us in this process. All these people are also involved in something called C4, so we have a lot of really great community organizations focused on mitigation here in the canyon. They meet quarterly, and Ben's always on those calls with us. The U.S. Forest Service is always on the calls with us as well. So it's just a really neat thing going on and getting this all moving. And I think that covers my list. So I'd like to introduce Kenzie Hart from the Ember Alliance. It's yours.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kenzie Hart. I tend to be fairly soft-spoken, but I'm getting better about that. Can those of you in the back hear me? Yes? Okay, wonderful. I have a microphone if I need it, but if I don't have to deal with that, I'd prefer not to. My name is Kenzie Hart. I am a wildfire analyst and project manager with the Ember Alliance. We are a nonprofit based in Fort Collins, and we primarily do work around getting communities to be communities to live with fire in a happy, healthy, productive manner. So part of what we do is help communities plan for wildfire. We also do some of the work on the ground with mitigation and implementation, actually getting those fuels reduced and doing some education work as well. So I am happy to be here. And I will also introduce Dr. Meg Matonis. She is my coworker. She's a senior wildfire analyst with us, and she will be speaking a little bit later on.
There are seats up here if anybody wants to come sit.
Yeah. I don't smell that bad, I promise. All right, I think a lot of you, my understanding is a lot of you understand that we are at fairly high risk living where we are, that there is a significant wildfire concern. And you probably know a good bit of history behind that, but I don't want to assume anything, and I want to make sure that everyone here is on the same page. So we're going to go back to a little bit of basics. If you have heard this before, just try not to snore, pretty please. So why do we need to plan to mitigate wildfire risk? These are a couple examples. This is an example photo set for you. So unfortunately, you can't see at the top, but this photo up here at the very top left corner is from 1899, and this one is from 1984. Now, I don't know if you can see this very clearly, and especially if you're in the back, but these are taken from the same location in Red Hill Valley here in Boulder. And a little over 100 years ago, about 125 years ago, this was fairly soon after we started to start managing the forests we live in, but they were still in a fairly natural state, the way that they were before settlers came. And there's a few trees up on these hillsides, but not a ton. They're around. And down here, put it 100 years later, and these forests, these hillsides are much more densely forested than they used to be. We have done, using all the best science from looking at trees and looking at historic fire regimes, as well as photos and documents from back before settlers' times, we know that this is how forests used to look here on the Front Range. And what we're looking at now with these dense forests is not how it used to be. So when we look at a couple different, we call them fire regimes. This is how fire exists in an ecosystem, sort of on a big basis. If you look at this side, we've got what it used to look like on the very top there. A few trees throughout, spaced apart, some small ones. A fire would come through fairly frequently, whether started by lightning or started by Native Americans who lived there. And it would burn the things down the bottom, but it would leave most of the trees alone. And then everything that was growing there would get returned back to the soil, and you'd have a great productive growth next year. For ponderosa pine forests, this would happen maybe every 3 to 15 years. And these fires were not super destructive. They were really healthy for the ecosystem. We started putting out fires when we started building homes here because we didn't want our homes to burn. It made sense at the time, but what's happened is we have all of those little trees that didn't get burned have grown up, and there's a lot of trees there. They're all competing for resources. They don't all get the amount of sunlight and nutrients they need. So they might be a little weaker, more susceptible to disease, pine beetle, things like that. If a fire comes through, that's a lot of fuel in there and a lot of dead, diseased, weak trees. They can't withstand the fire, so they burn, and they burn hot. And if you've been to the East Troublesome fire burn area, if you've been to the Cameron Peak area, you know what that looks like. That is a scorched soil that takes a lot longer to recover. And that's where we find ourselves today, with a lot of these ecosystems that we need to restore back to those ecosystems. So that is the goal. But we have a big district. How many square miles? 52 square miles. We can't do that all in the next 5 years, right? That's way too much to do and overwhelming. I wouldn't know where to start. So we begin this planning process. This process is based off of an idea called fire adapted communities. These landscapes that we're in, they are adapted to fire. That's how they're used to growing. We as people should get used to living with fire, and then we can live in harmony in these areas. So fire adapted communities, you don't have to read all this right now. You can see this graphic a little later, especially if it's a little too small in the back. But there's different aspects of what communities can do to become able to live harmoniously with fire. So some of that is like having a healthy response, like knowing that you can evacuate safely. Some of it has to do with infrastructure. Is your power and water infrastructure protected and also not causing some of the problems? And then some of it has to do with resident mitigation. People do need to have a sense of ownership and stewardship over the land that they own here. So that's the foundation of this process, is becoming a fire adapted community. What is a CWPP, or a Community Wildfire Protection Plan? It is a process that we go through as a community to plan how you want to reduce that risk. If you prioritize everything, you prioritize nothing. So we have to figure out where we have to start working first. Through this process, you get a few outcomes. One of them is priority project areas. So this might be a square mile over here, or maybe it's 50 acres over here that poses the most risk to residents, and treating it will give the most benefit. So we'll have a couple of those projects, landscape scale projects, identified. We will also have priority actions for homeowners based on where you live. So if you live in certain neighborhoods, you may have different risks than other neighborhoods and different resources. So we'll identify those and be able to tell you what you can do in your home that'll be most important there. And then there'll be a document that outlines all of the processes that we've gone through, as well as all the background information on the models and the meetings that we've had. We will also have, thanks to Cork and us, a couple websites, so a website and a story map that will also keep this information updated and be easily accessible for you all. According to the State Forest Service, community wildfire protection plans represent the best opportunity we have to address the challenges of the wildland-urban interface in a way that brings about comprehensive and locally supported change. This is why we do those. It's our best shot. So if you haven't seen this map before, that little black outline is the Coal Creek Canyon Fire Protection District. And these are the recent wildfires in Colorado. I'm not here to fearmonger, but I do hope that you know that a fire the size of East Troublesome, it could wipe out the district so quickly, so easily. And that's a reality that we face. While I don't want to be scary, I also know that this is a real significant problem that we need to address. And it's a serious one. So what does this process look like? I said it's a process. What are we going to be doing? The process takes about a year. So we started about 2 months ago and we'll finish in, I think it's February or March of 2024. We've got a few different steps. So one of them is community and partner engagement. So engaging with you all and engaging with the stakeholders who work in this area. We do a hazard and risk analysis. So some of this is modeling fire behavior. Some of this is looking at on the ground hazards here in the district. We do prioritization and implementation planning. So we take all of the information from the communities, from the partners, and from those on the ground assessments and models, and we make some projects and plan priorities for those and see who can accomplish some of those projects. Then we have the final document and the work starts from there. As the chief alluded to, you've got some plan units here. Plan units are a version of a neighborhood basically, but what these are collections of communities who have similar fire risk, similar topography, similar evacuation routes, and also some social connections. So these are groups of folks who can work together when it requires more than just doing something on your own home, which typically this will require. We'll have another map of this up later, and I think Jody was also helping folks identify your plan units. So who is involved in this process? The community and stakeholders. So community engagement is what we're doing right now. We are talking to the people who live here, the people who will be most impacted if a wildfire happens. We have a few different ways for communities to get involved. So we've got the kickoff meeting today. First, thank you for being here. We also have a community survey that'll be starting now or soon. And that'll be one of the best ways for us to get feedback from you on concerns, values, beliefs, and things like that. It'll also give us good data as to where the community has their most important priorities within this district. We'll have community focus groups that I'm sure Cork has talked about. So we'll have 4 of those meetings. Those will be focused in a few smaller clusters, and you'll be reviewing some of the information that we're presenting. We'll do our best to model fire and evacuations with all of our information, but we can't know everything, and the best information comes from those who live here. So we run it by the core team, and we run it by you all as the community. We'll have community review, so when the document's close to being finalized, you'll get a chance to see the document, you'll see how your input was used, and if you feel like it was reflected accurately, you'll be able to give us feedback before that document is ever signed. And then once it's signed, March 2024 and beyond is where you take the reins and you start doing the mitigation work together. We also have a number of stakeholders who are involved. This is a list of most of them that the chief also went over. And these are folks, so the community members, when we talk about community members, these are folks, these are you who have personal vested interest in the protection and mitigation around this district. It will affect you personally if your house burns down. Stakeholders tend to have professional interest. So I have a professional interest in helping you make sure we have a community that doesn't burn down. Same with the State Forest Service, folks like that. But they have a slightly different interest, so we interact with them slightly differently than the community members. I'm going to pass it over to Meg here for understanding how we look at and assess local wildfire risk.
Hello, my name is Meg Matonis. I'm the Senior Wildfire Analyst for the Ember Alliance. I have my PhD in forest ecology, so when Kenzie said doctor, there's a medical incident I have to refer you to. That is not the kind of doctor that I am. I've been on-call firefighter with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office for 8 years. I was on a hand crew for the Cold Springs fire near Netherland for 10 days. And I was on the Cameron Peak fire and have participated in prescribed burns and some smaller initial attacks in northern Colorado. So as part of the community wildfire protection planning process, we assess the wildfire risk in this part of Colorado. And we're going to do local fire behavior modeling. We're waiting on some really high quality data that the Colorado State Forest Service is about to release in a couple of weeks. It's gonna be really exciting. They worked with another contractor to create a really high resolution, high accuracy data set. And we will use that and some predictions of moderate fire weather during the summer, and then those really extreme, what the chief is calling 90th percentile weather days, the days where it's really hot, dry, and windy. And that'll be data that's from local weather stations that's been gathered for over 10 years. And we'll use that to predict potential fire behavior that could happen across this district. We also do on-the-ground community assessments because there's limitations to modeling fire behavior. We don't know the construction of every single home from satellite imagery, and the scale we do the modeling isn't at the scale of each individual home. So we do an on-the-ground assessment where we're able to drive around and look at people's homes and get a better sense of what fire might happen in smaller areas of the fire protection district. The fire risk is an important part of the process because we use it to provide context for citizens. So instead of just generally saying there's a wildfire problem in Coal Creek Canyon, it gives us a better sense of like, this part of the district could experience really extreme fire behavior. This part of the fire protection district could have grass fires with really rapid rates of spread, but really good access. And you could have people in there to button up that fire before it reaches more than a couple of acres. The assessment will help create probably a sense of urgency based on actual risks, just driving around here and having done community wildfire protection plans. And other part of Jefferson County, there are some concerns for homes and people who are living in areas where there's limited egress, there's really dense fuels, but there are things that can be done. And the purpose of this is to identify areas of higher risk, prioritize actions that can happen. So as a community, you can start taking steps to, hopefully in 5 years, when you redo this and update your CWPP, you can say, we've reduced risk in this part of the community. We also want to think about some of the values at risk that could benefit from fires, like the prescribed burn that's happened around here. There are some areas where the best way to approach reducing the fuels and restoring conditions in those forests are using fire in a safe and judicious manner. So it's important to think about wildfire not just as we want to stop all fire everywhere. We want to create conditions that when fires do burn, the impacts on the human values that we have are lower, and the ability of the ecosystem to respond in a positive way is enhanced. Some of the output from the fire behavior models that we use are variables like flame length and the potential type of fire. So is it a fire that just moves through the grass that's underneath the trees? Or is it a fire that moves up shrubs and small trees into the canopy of trees, and then it moves from treetop to treetop to treetop? And the models use information on fuels, the cover of canopies, so how close trees are and how many trees there are, the distance between the ground and the tops of trees where there's enough fuel for the trees to burn, and topography, and then wind. So there's a lot of different variables that go into it to get outputs like this. So these are 2 example maps from Indian Hills Fire Protection District, which is south of here, also in Jefferson County, and has some similar characteristics to here. But since we're still waiting on the updated data from the Colorado State Forest Service, we haven't run the analysis for your community yet, because the data that's currently available is from 2018. So we thought, you know, it's 5 years later, might as well use the latest and greatest data. If you're not an on-the-ground firefighter, and even if you are an on-the-ground firefighter, looking at a map like this can be difficult to interpret and translate into what needs to be done to make the community safer, and where are the actual risks adjacent to human infrastructure. So there might be parts of the district where there is elevated fire risk, but it's very remote. It's not threatening a lot of homes. It's maybe not the top priority for doing work that can be expensive and take a lot of time. So we gather a lot of data about the location of people's homes, the location of different businesses, the location of water treatment plants, waste management facilities, businesses, schools, hospitals. And then we look at the location of those pieces of infrastructure relative to potential fire behavior. And then we estimate like what percentage of homes in the fire protection district could be exposed to radiant heat. So the heat from flames that are close to the home. What could be exposed to short range embers, and then what could be exposed to long range embers, because in a lot of fires, vast majority of the homes that burn are not burning because flame touches the side of the home. It's because an ember lands on the roof of the home or in the vegetation, the mulch around the home, and catches on fire, ignites that home, and then that home emits embers and catches another home on fire. So we're trying to incorporate that into our interpretation of the fire behavior model output. Another big concern is not just the risk of fire to homes, but the potential risk of fire to people who are evacuating from a community, or firefighters who are entering a community along really narrow, densely forested roads. And this is a really big problem across Jefferson County, and the communities that we've worked with south of here in Jefferson County. This is part of the CWPP that gets the residents most concerned, and as people who care about our fellow Colorado residents, it gets us really concerned as well, that there are a lot of roads where if there was an accident, high evacuation congestion, a tree that fell across the road, and then a fire burned up the steep slope and people were trapped on the road, you could have a very dangerous situation. So treating along roadways is something that we prioritize in the community wildfire protection plans. And we've even had some great success with utility companies who own rights of way along roads. When we share this information with them, them saying, yeah, we would like to be a partner in treating along these roadways to keep our infrastructure safe and keep residents safe. We will do evacuation modeling for this community. So this is, once again, this is Indian Hills. The output of the model is congestion index. So it is the relative increase in travel time under no congestion versus a district-wide evacuation. So areas that are in the really hot pink are areas that could have greater than it could take 5 times longer to travel that segment of road. And the reason that we do this is to then identify areas where there's potential for high congestion coupled with high fire risk. And then that's an area to start with the treatments. And I think one of the most beneficial parts of the process is our on-the-ground assessments, especially when we're able to do it with the fire protection district folks. And we'll drive around the community. We'll look at the fuels, but we'll also be using the output from our fire behavior modeling. But we'll look at things that you can't quantify from the models. So we'll look at the roads. Could you get a type 3 engine down this road? Are there pullovers so that you could handle two-way traffic during an evacuation? And this is where we look at home construction materials and the kind of proportion of homes in a different one of those plan units that Kenzie showed with all the different colors. What proportions of homes in this area have highly flammable material? What proportion of homes already have homeowners who have undertaken steps to mitigate the risk on their homes? And then also, what are some other challenges for fire suppression? Like, is there access to hydrants within this community, or are there access to water sources that could be used when doing structure protection? And then that feeds into what are the specific actions that people can take in different parts of the district. Pass it back to Kenzie.
So we've gathered all of this information, a few months from now, we will have gathered all this information, feedback from the community, feedback from the stakeholders, feedback from the modeling and the on-the-ground assessments. We will have so much data, and how do we put that to use? So the core team, the folks who are here to represent you, some of them are those professional stakeholders, and some of them are residents who are representing their fellow community members. They take all of that data, the models that we do, the public input, and the information from these on-the-ground assessments, and they look at all of that together. They look at what things, if the community says that wildlife habitat is not as important as water quality, they may weigh a little more heavily on the areas that are high risk near water rather than high risk near recreation sites. And we will look at all those different variables and find out where is most important to treat and where is feasible to treat, and then who can do the work there. So we will get out of that things like this 40-acre stand of trees needs to be thinned back to historic conditions. We may have a roadside treatment project so that this neighborhood that has some evacuation concerns, we can make it so the end of that road where there might be a lot of backup is a lot safer for people to be driving through. It might include things like the community needs assistance in managing slash, the waste that is created by doing some of these fuels work. And it could be that the district and the Improvement Association collaborate on buying a community chipper or something like that. It could be a recommendation like that. And then it also could be maybe the district is in need of getting a new engine or installing some more water cisterns in different areas. So it could be some kind of capacity issues like that. There's all kinds of recommendations, and they are tailored to this community. The recommendations will come in a few different stages. So as we've said, these community wildfire protection plans are supposed to last about 5 years. They haven't always in the past. The current one is from 2015, I think. 2008? 2008, all right. 2008, that data is not super useful. I don't know how many of you were here in 2008. So these things should be updated about every 5 years, especially if actions are being taken 5 years from now. This area could look so different. And so in 5 years, we'll want to reevaluate that. We also can't plan for 15 years out into the future what projects we're going to. That's too overwhelming to look at for anyone, for a homeowner or for someone who's working professionally in the district. So we've got a few different sort of scales of work. Short-term actions are like our top priority actions. We can do that with the people we have. We can do that with the resources we have. We just need to go out and do it. So that can happen by the end of next year. Some of them will be midterm actions. They need a little bit of planning. They need a little bit of funding. They need a little bit of community work to get involved in that. And then those can be accomplished. And then there's these long-term ones, things that'll take a lot of grant funding, things that'll take maybe more staffing or significant other resources. Maybe it needs the community that doesn't have a lot of support needs to spend a lot of time doing some outreach and education with their neighbors to get that support for a project. So those ones, no, but they'll only be about 5 years from now. So we don't want to think way too crazy about what we want the district to look like, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. But in 5 years, what can we do? So this is an example of a different community. This is up in Loveland, where if you see the green colors, those are existing fuel treatments. These are either wildfires, maybe thinning, maybe pile burning, things that have happened on the landscape to help reduce that fuel load. And so these blue blobs that you see between them are the priority project areas for this community. They'll kind of tie together these different existing treatments in those areas where people can work. And this creates a really nice sort of catcher's mitt thing for coming into Loveland. So that's their priority areas. And that's one of the things that you'll have is you'll have a map of these priority areas and specific actions within them. You'll have a map like this that'll talk about priority roadways. So these ones in the red are the stretches of road that have potentially non-survivable conditions. So those areas that we're worried about people while they're evacuating or firefighters going in while they're trying to fight fires. And they also have a lot of congestion. So if it takes someone 5 times as long to get out and that roadway is not safe, we want to work on that one first. So that's the kind of thing we'll have. You'll also have some second and third priority projects if we get work done on all of those first ones. And lastly, and most relevant to you all, will be these plan unit priorities. So this is, again, a different district, but each of these different colors is a plan unit, and there's different folks who live in there, and they have a rate of relative risk. So this one, this big map here, is their overall risk. So say the fire department has enough resources to help 3 plan units. This can help them figure out which plan units need their help the most, need their help in the next 5 years. We also look at a few different specific risks within these plan units. So I know you can't see them all there, but we've got fire risk. So that's like the fire models that we make. How likely is it to burn and how intense will that fire potentially be? We've got suppression challenges. So what that means is how hard is it for your firefighters to come fight fires there? If there's not a lot of access there, if they can't get some of their engines up the roads, if they can't get water, things like that, that's a suppression challenge. So maybe those are things that these specific communities will have to address. We've also got evacuation hazards. So if it's difficult to get out, maybe that's something that those plan units will have to focus on. And then home ignition zone hazards. So those are your own property and where your property kind of connects to your neighbors there. These will have maps, and then there'll also be specific recommendations for each community that outline what those specific hazards are. Raise your hand if you know what the home ignition zone is, defensible space, home hardening. That's so nice to see. So the home ignition zone will be a big part of what we're talking about. So that both includes the home itself, or an outbuilding, a barn, whatever structures that you have. That's the home hardening part. It's making sure that that structure can't ignite as easily. And then there's the defensible space area, which is up to 100 feet around your home. And that's getting to, excuse me, that's making sure that fire can't come right up to your house, burning as hot as it is when it's out in those trees. Home hardening, we already went over that. So what will you get at the end? What will you see a year from now? You will get a CWPP document. This is a regulated document. These kind of were created by some federal enabling legislation 20 years ago. And this is what we're required to do. The State Forest Service, the counties, and your fire protection district will sign off on it. But it will be like 150 pages, and I do not expect any of you to read that whole thing. There will be a summary document in addition to that. This will have, you're welcome. This will have the best, this will have the information that you need to work on. So it'll have those actions for you in those plan units, both for you to take specifically and how you and your neighbors need to work together. And it'll just be the shortest that we can make that to tell you what actions you can take. There will also be the website and story map. These will have that same action-focused information as well as updated info on the survey, on the focus groups, and where we are in the planning process. This will also be where you go to give feedback on the final documents, and we will have interactive maps on there. So you see these static maps up here, it's kind of hard to know what you're looking at. Online, there will be maps where you can zoom in and see what it's like in your neighborhood. So what can you do now? You can sign up for email updates. I believe that most of you are signed up, but if you aren't, Jody over there has a sign up sheet. This is how we'll keep in contact with you. We won't spam you. I will never see your email address. Cork is there, so you can get on her if you get spammed. But no, she's just going to tell you. Where you can come to get information and when we need your input. There'll be the June focus groups, which Cork will also reach out to you about. Those focus groups will be local for you and a couple other plan units. They'll be usually at the fire stations, and those will be another great spot for you to both see what's happening in the process and give us feedback on your perspectives. And then there'll be the survey, and Cork will send out a survey link to you very soon, I believe, too. So we've got a community values activity. This is sort of the first step in us getting to know what this community wants, needs, and what your values are. But before we get into that, I want to open this up to questions. So if you all have questions about this process or the people that are involved, we don't have answers right now about what fire behavior looks like, of course, we're just starting the process. But if you have questions about that, go ahead and raise your hand. And if you're on the Zoom, go ahead and drop them in the chat and Jody will read them out. I see you one. All right. Go for it.
You live on a private road and your assessment shows it needs a better evacuation route or roadside treatment. I think I live on a place where a fire truck cannot get to. Private road, how does that work?
Yeah, if it's a private road, then those who own the road will be responsible for roadside mitigation. If it's a publicly owned road, whether by the county or the state, then the stakeholders group will be either working directly with them. Sometimes they're involved in these meetings, or we'll get in contact with them and work with them on that. But if it's a private road, if it's say a road association, then that association is responsible for the mitigation. Or if it's a private road on just your land, then you are responsible for that mitigation. There are resources to help with that, and those will also be presented in the CWPP. I guess one right there.
Does every fire district in the state of Colorado have one of these plans?
They do not. Most of them do. Some of them are old and outdated. So they are starting to come back in popularity. But those who have them are mostly those here in the west half of the state. Some counties do them rather than at the fire protection district level. So Jefferson County is going to start their process and Boulder County will be doing a process as well. But those will not be as fine scale and they can't get the same kind of local feedback.
I have a follow-on question. Does this include notification of pre-evac and evacuations?
We will have information about that.
Okay, the reason I ask is we also own property down in Teller County, very near the 403 fire that just went on 1,500 acres. And there was a tremendous problem with people getting notifications. I guess and I'm not all up on it, but they used to use Nixle, and Nixle didn't have enough space to handle everybody, so they switched to the other one, whatever it is, and it's a mess. And I mean, there were people in evacuation areas that weren't getting notices, and they were on Facebook and they were on Nextdoor, and they were trying to talk to their neighbors. And that was a big issue down there, and I'm just hoping it's covered in this thing.
So a couple things with that, since we have such a big group, great audience. You can go on the Fire Protection District's website under homeowner resources. It's going to have where to sign up for notifications. Now, if you live in Jefferson County, I want you to sign up for Jefferson County's notifications and Boulder County's, because we are dispatched out of Boulder County. That's who we talk to on the radio when we're going to a fire. And their notifications will go out to any resident in Coal Creek Canyon if we need to get.
Is it Everbridge? Did I use an Everbridge? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll try it.
Chief, any idea what percentage of residents in Coal Creek Canyon have those alerts?
I looked at the map too lately, but I do have a place where I can look at least for Boulder County. Who signed up for Boulder County?
You think more than half, or?
I doubt it's that many.
Okay, so it's less than half of the residents in the. So as neighborhood friends, residents, we need to let our neighbors know that this is something that's imperative that they sign up for.
Yeah, it's a huge piece.
With the turtleneck? Let's see.
Now, I live on a road, this one here, Crescent Lake Road, which is one road in and it dead ends. Do you guys consider that a high extreme evacuation fire hazard because there's only one road in, only one way to get in and out?
Yeah, we consider that it's one of the factors that goes into it, but yes, one way in and one way out roads are significant concern to us.
And then one more question. Are you guys in this plan that you guys are doing, are you guys going to try and identify creating new water sources since we don't have hydrants in a lot of the areas that we have? Some of us have cisterns, but not all of us have cisterns, and not big cisterns. Are you guys planning on identifying and maybe building and creating new water sources for our areas than just the lake that's down the
We have more than just the lake.
Oh, okay.
So whenever somebody builds a new home in the district, they have the option either of putting in their own private cistern that's only for the fire department's use, meaning they can't use it for house water, backup water, or anything like that. And that has to be a minimum of 5,000 gallons, which if you think the rate that our fire trucks pump at, 5,000 gallons, that's like a drop of water for us, right? Yeah. So we really steer them to option B, which is paying into our community cistern fund, which helps all of us. So they pay $1 per square foot, finished per square foot of their home. And that goes into the community cistern fund. So far the district's done 3 or 4 community cisterns, and those are 30,000 gallon cisterns. And people give us an easement, say if your property was a good location for one, we get an easement from you to have us pay for and install that cistern. So it's there for anybody to use for any of the houses in the area.
Because as you know, in the area that I'm from, our cisterns are what, 500 gallons? 1,000?
1,200.
1,200?
Yeah, which for a big engine isn't much, right? It doesn't do us a whole lot on a structure fire, but if you talk to some of the wildland firefighters in the room, 1,200 gallons is a nice thing to have when you're in a Type 6 brush truck, that holds 400 gallons. That lets you refill a couple times, right?
So if that is a concern that comes up from a lot of folks, then that will be something specific in the recommendations. Yeah. Let's go back to Zoom, folks.
Actually, I could just follow up on that. There's a question online about the design requirements for those cisterns. Is that available?
Yeah, they can just, what's the best address? Tabby? Info at? So they just send an email to info@coalcreekcanyonfd.org.
Oh, what? That was sent. info@coalcreekcanyon.org.
FD.org.
coalcreekcanyonfd.org.
I have another one too about hearing more about defensible space and home hardening, or perhaps a good resource for me to learn. I'll just quickly answer. We have some guides back here from the State Forest Service, if anybody would like one. And I'll put a link here in chat for how to access that online.
For those of you on Zoom, there is a State Forest Service publication called the Home Ignition Zone Guide. And that is both here in person and if you are online, that is available on the Colorado State Forest Service's website.
Will this presentation be made available to us online or
Yes.
specifically?
Yes, we've been recording it.
At what location?
I think we will post it on CWPP for CCC.com. No? Did I get it wrong? Cold Creek CWPP.com. Okay. .org. Cold Creek CWPP.org.
Cold Creek CWPP.org.
We'll just send out a follow-up email to
Awesome.
This is a little bit more for the chief. If we were to install a cistern for the fire department use, and that cistern were to get used, is it the homeowner's responsibility to refill 5,000 gallons or however many, or would the fire department contribute to refilling that cistern?
We would contribute if we could. It depends on the scale of the incident, right? So if we blow through 100 different 5,000 gallon cisterns or something like that, we've only got 30,000 gallons at station 2. So we would help out as we could. But certainly if we just use one cistern, yeah, we'll cut back and forth.
How, if at all, are insurance companies involved in your stakeholder group?
They are not currently involved. I think we would be open to involving them if they would like to participate. We have not had much success with having them participate in the past, just to be transparent about that. But and another
follow-up to that. Do communities that develop this plan, is it a good tool to work with state representatives and if there's any engagement on the Hill of Denver? Because we are involved in trying to work with insurance at the state level. I'm just wondering if a tool that has been found useful for that at all.
not that I know of.
I don't know like directly. It does empower residents here to have science-backed information to share with county commissioners or to share with their representatives. But I don't know directly of like a representative like using a CWPP, but developing legislation.
Yeah.
But to the insurance issue, we've had, like, people are sometimes concerned that we do this analysis and then that you're going to have your insurance dropped. And insurance agencies do their own risk assessment. They don't use the CWPP assessment to our knowledge. And their assessment of risk is pretty independent of the CWP. So some of the data they use will be the same as what we use, but they draw their own conclusions. But undertaking defensible space work is probably the best chance that you have to entice the insurance to cover you.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, Chief, for all that you do and all that your firefighters do. I don't.
Just sit behind the desk, Dave.
I know that's not true. No, I have a number of friends, personal friends who are firefighters, and I've seen them after they've come in from a call. And it just really moves me, the dedication and the personal sacrifice that you guys, men and women, devote to our community. And I do have a question for you. So what'd you learn from the Marshall Fire? I know communication was something that was mentioned.
I mean, you buttered me up.
How much time do we have?
Yeah. Certainly communications are an issue, Dave. It's a big firefighter safety learning lesson too, right? At a point in the fire, there was a call out on the radio, just everybody pull back to a safe spot. Right now, you can't do much good with what the fire's doing. And that's where we get into when Kenzie's talking about, you know, fire hardening your home. One of our biggest tactics in large scale events is fire front following. And I always trip over that, but fire front following, meaning that, you know, the old image of one of our firefighters standing in between a big flaming front and your home with like a hose in their hand. We don't do that anymore. That's what gets people killed. And we learned that the majority of homes don't burn down from that direct flame impact, right? So we wait until it's relatively safe. It's not always safe for us, right? But then we come in and then we can catch those embers that might be starting a fire on the deck or up on your roof or something like that. I did tour the Marshall Fire area with the Gilpin County Commissioners not too long ago, and their OEM staff, things like that. And there's some lessons learned about resiliency and recovery. It was mostly a recovery tour, and it's pretty shocking. You know, when I was there, one household had moved back in. Something to take seriously for sure.
I think we learned not to have a big windy day when we have our fire.
Yeah. So I will say that the week before the Marshall fire, we almost hosted the Marshall fire. So we had a 100-mile-an-hour wind event, which you guys probably remember. Box truck blew over on 93, took out the power lines. They were still live, and they were getting to within a couple feet of the tall cured grass. And in that case, we would have sent that head fire right at us. We got lucky.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we as residents can best help our volunteers and our chief by mitigating and being responsible for our own properties, helping our neighbors, organizing everything in our communities and our neighborhoods. That's the best way to help you.
Yeah.
Plus listening skills.
Grassroots efforts, right, Dave? Because I'm sure you know neighbors that need work done, but can't do it and don't know the resources to get it done. That's why we have to kind of work together as a community, get it all banged out.
Just a small note on that. The Marshall Fire has a lot of lessons to learn, as do East Troublesome and Cameron Peak, but they're responding to more than one fire every week here in this district. And the chances are that it will be a smaller fire, maybe a 20-acre or 40-acre fire that gets a few of the homes here on a somewhat average day, more likely than a Marshall fire scenario. So when we're doing our analyses, we're looking for what's most likely to happen and where we can mitigate on those kind of average days. And then the extreme days, you know, we'll try and mitigate to get those, but we start out with the average and that'll do the most good. Yep.
I had an event that helped mitigate on Twin Spruce last year, and just about everyone that I contacted got involved, but some people wouldn't even open their door and talk to me. And their property is one of the worst. How do you approach someone like that?
So that'll be some of that kind of community outreach information will come about later in the process. We'll need to hear from the community what those issues you are encountering are, and maybe what tools are going to work best in the community, and we'll have those. We'll have some answers for you at the end of the process. For now, the simplest answer is some people will never mitigate, and that is just a fact. But
it's scary.
Yes. Yes.
This is a question for the chief. My insurance company, who you spoke with, had me sign up. Had me sign up with a program that's in their company called the Wildfire Protection Plan, and they actually, as part of my signing up and being a member of that insurance underwriter, if I have a fire, they if it's a bad fire, they send up a unit up that actually comes and sprays my home. Have they talked to you guys about the chemicals that they're using that is supposed to help No.
is the short answer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that started happening several years ago. It was a little squirrely from an incident management and incident command standpoint, because all of a sudden these contract engines were showing up on fires all over the country, and they weren't tied in with communications and things. That's become a lot more seamless. I won't say it's a perfect thing, but they need to be a part of the overall fire response, right? We can't just, once we evacuate you guys and close the road, we can't force you out of your home. We can strongly suggest that you leave, but once you're out, we can keep you from coming back until it's safe. So we can't just have random people running around inside of the fire.
So what do I need to do anything for you to alert you that I've got that program in place for my home so that you're aware that somebody might be coming up? Well, if there's a
yeah, I mean, you can send me any information that you have. I don't think too many of our residents have that service. And also just know they're not, if we get a lightning strike and it starts spreading and it's threatening your house, they're not showing up in like 20 minutes. You know, a lot of times these engines are coming down from Wyoming or wherever the contractor is.
There is never a guarantee that they will.
Drawn out fires. Did you say that was Chubb?
Chubb's one that does it.
And then to follow
Travelers.
And then to follow up on this lady's question, is there no legislation, no law, state or countywide, that requires homeowners to mitigate their properties?
So that would be a WUI code or development code. Those are at the county level. And the fun part about your district is you have 3 counties here. So I cannot tell you off the top of my head what those regulations are. They will be included in the document so you can easily access that kind of information in one place. And then has the district adopted any WUI codes?
Well, we go with the counties.
Okay, then it's the county.
Just so we're not adding something on top of all 3 counties. I will tell you, if you live in Jefferson County and you tried to like repair your deck or anything like that, and you put in for a permit for it, that triggers the WUI inspection and things like that. So they're starting to take it pretty seriously.
And also a new building. We built in Jefferson County. I'm in Blue Mountain 10 years ago. And we had a forestry come out and assess the trees. We only had 4 and they cut 3 down because they were within 40 feet of the house. We also had to put in a cistern and a sprinkler system. And disappointingly, I have State Farm. They gave me no credit. They don't, that is not in their assessment. So that's, I think legislatively, we need to really get insurance companies involved. And because the Marshall fires, my insurance went up $3,000 today from last year.
The one thing I want to say about the wildfire protection partners is they can help if your home is already defensible. So if you've already undertaken some home hardening and defensible space actions, then they can do their job. Same with your local firefighters. But if you have done nothing, the chance that they can do anything to help your home is slim. So the work in here still needs to be done.
We want to know how to make them not penalize us for things that we have or haven't done, somebody else has done.
These are questions beyond my pay grade at the moment, but I hear that it sounds like it's important for us as a core team to try and reach out to insurance companies and see if we can get them involved in the conversation. So heard and noted. Let's go over there.
We border the national forest. That is kind of the stepchild of the Boulder office. It took years of trying to get them to mitigate one single little issue. We can't remove fuel. There's tons of dead trees there. What is the National Forest or the Forest Service going to do to help us with some of these issues?
That's a great question. So we have the U.S. Forest Service on the core team. They are here and they will be part of that prioritization process. So I can't tell you right now what they are doing, but we will find out what their planned actions are and where they have capacity to do more work here. We will also put in the document information about the Good Neighbor Authority, which is a program that they have where if you back up to Forest Service land, there are certain authorizations that you can get with them to do work into their property to help mitigate your land. Don't do that without talking to them first. But that is a program that does exist for that very reason.
And that's another benefit of having a CWPP for your community is that the Forest Service uses them. Like they actually do use them. They don't just say that to decide where to do priority projects. If there's a community who has an area on the forest called out as something that concerns them from a fire risk standpoint, it does elevate the priority of that project for the forest.
Do you have a question of any kind?
Or in the way back?
We're talking about kind of fire mitigation and defensive areas around your house. Is there somebody we can call to come up?
It's Jay.
See what needs to be
Jay Scheller.
or how to defend our houses?
Yeah, I see. I feel Kenzie looking at me. So Boulder and Gilpin County's good news is you have a program called Wildfire Partners. It is an awesome organization, and they can help with ideas of what needs to be done. We're working on something better, hopefully in the future for Jefferson County. They do have a list of approved foresters that can come out. I've heard it's very difficult to get somebody scheduled to come out.
There you go, Cole Park. Well, they only do the house and the immediate around it, not all the way out to 100.
But you got a certificate. I sent mine on to my insurance company. I had to do a little mitigation to get the certificate, but it worked out. So with slash collection, Jefferson County seems to like to be on a per pay basis. It makes it harder, for people to afford to give it up as much slash as they can. It seems like Boulder and other counties don't have that. Jeff Kogan, keep your shit together and not make us pay for it.
We are helping Jefferson County with their CWPP right now, and slash is like a reoccurring theme. So not that we can force them to do it, but slash and the cost prohibitive nature of disposing of it and challenges with getting it to disposal sites is something that we'll talk about quite a lot with all the county partners who are involved in that plan. So I can't promise anything, but that is a big issue that the county is aware of, and hopefully we'll be able to find a reasonable solution. If not, there are more like fire protection district level programs that other fire protection districts in Colorado use, and we'll share some of the approaches that have worked well in other communities.
If that's a concern, that is one of the specific questions we ask on the surveys and probably will in the focus groups as well. So if you have that issue, respond to the survey and we can show the proportion of residents that need this slash collection or slash disposal to make that a higher priority project.
And we're aware of that frustration. I get it. I live here too. We're aware of that frustration, and we've already had some stakeholder meetings brainstorming different ways to address it.
So your commissioner is, I'm sorry, your commissioner is Tracy Kraft Tharp. I invited her to the meeting tonight, but she wasn't able to come. A few thousand phone calls to her office probably wouldn't hurt. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease. They normally don't. One of those swing back in there.
Sorry? Absolutely. So if you would stick with us for the next 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to go through a little exercise here to get your feedback to jumpstart this process. I'm not asking you to speak up in front of this entire group, but what I am going to do is have every 2 rows or clusters of folks get together and talk about what your main concerns are when it comes to wildfire risk, and what do you need to better prepare for wildfire. That could include some of the things that we've talked about. If you have time, talk about some solutions or ideas that you have, because you may have creative solutions that we don't. But what we'll do is we'll give out a couple big pieces of paper and markers. We'll ask you to go ahead and do that. And then in 15 minutes, we will release you all back out into the little bit of snow.
And we use, like, we actually will use what you come up with. Like, we've had some really creative ideas emerge from this exercise before. So,